at this by now. All right, well, hello and welcome to the June 2020 Policy Forum. We have a ton of stuff to go over. It has been an incredibly busy month for advocacy and movement on the RESPECT Act. So before we get started, Tom, did you want to give a couple words of welcome?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Yes, hi, everyone. It's always good to see you. It helps reinforce the passion and the motivation that the whole team has to just keep looking in every corner, down every avenue for a way to advance our cause. So we really appreciate it. There is nothing like trying to get federal legislation passed, and it's been just an amazing year since the bills were introduced, and a lot more to go, but incredible progress, and we thank you so much. So as Jen said, a lot to talk about. I'm interested in hearing the update as well, and hearing from all of you. So thanks, Jen.
All right. And my partner in crime, Susan Ellsworth, is on the call just to give a couple words about the affiliate network.
Hey, everybody. It's always nice to see you, and it's spending time with people that are motivated to get things done and make changes for our field. We are having exciting times with our affiliate network. We've added a couple new affiliates, one in New York and one in California recently. We're so excited to have them join us. And if anybody on the call today is interested in what it's like to be an affiliate of FASD United, please reach out to me, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about that. I'm looking forward to our call today. Thanks, Jen.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to start with some state legislation updates. This is something we started a couple months ago as states were starting to introduce FASD related legislation. And I think it's important to keep up on because some of the legislation that's being introduced, say in one state, could very easily be taken and introduced in another state. And so we're looking at these as kind of test cases for how we could replicate good FASD legislation throughout the US. So, and this is a bit of review for some of you, but there was legislation that we know of in Washington State, California, Massachusetts, New York, Hawaii, Minnesota, and Florida. Washington passed, that was removing IQ as a measurement for disability services in Washington State. That means that most of our folks with average IQs and FASD would now qualify. California, really exciting today. They have Senate Bill 1016, and that's being introduced, or sorry, that's being, they're having a hearing today in the Education Subcommittee, looking at adding FASD as a qualifying condition under other health impaired for IEP services. So really watching that legislation closely because that might be a good one to, again, move into other states and learn some good lessons from what the folks in California are doing. That hearing is happening right now. So very excited to hear the outcome of that. Unfortunately, the legislation in New York, I believe, did not pass, but they're taking another stab at it next year. And we've got some legislation that is looking at using the federal definition of disability in states. And those are some other ones we're closely monitoring. If there's anybody in any of the states that are listed here that would like to comment on the status of their legislation, please feel free to speak up. I don't know, Massachusetts, how things are going with yours, or if you're going to take another stab at it next year. Laura?
It says I'm Laura Bedard, but I'm Kristen Erickson. But
yes.
We share our Zoom account, and I didn't have time to change my name. Our legislative session is going to end at the end of July, and we're trying to have a huge final push. I don't think it's going to be enough, only because of all the legislation that they seem to have trying to push through at the same time. But we did have someone from the Disability Law Center do research on all the different states that had changed. Ours is to change the definition to the federal definition. And they found that Massachusetts is either 48, 49, or 50 behind all the other states in having some more updated legislation. And we have put that in our paperwork documentation, hoping that that would push things along. And there had been, I guess, a promise when they did legislation years ago about autism that we would not be forgotten. And so we're trying to remind them of that. But I think it's probably going to go to next year is what I think. I want to be positive, but that's what our sponsors are saying.
Could you provide that information to us? One of the things that we're thinking about doing as we go through this is to develop state report cards on FASD, and that data would be very helpful. I think that would be one key indicator. And so if you could, that'd be great if you could.
Yeah, I will ask. It's not my information, so I'll just make sure, but I'm sure they will let me have it.
Great, thanks.
Fantastic. All right, Susan, I will pass it over to you for our federal updates.
Okay, well, the appropriation process is going as we speak. If you recall last year, the normal course of events is that the fiscal year for the federal government ends the end of September. In 2022, they did not pass the appropriations bill omnibus until I believe it was March of this year. So I think that's going to be different this year. The House Appropriations Committee has passed the subcommittee has passed their funding bill. They don't have the data sheets, so it's hard to tell whether we had requested an increase in the Center for Disease on the birth and child defects division. And so we don't know that yet. When they start doing the markup in the full house, we'll know that. But I do know that there's increases for NIAAA and CDC. So, and the entire bill is 13% increase over 2022. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. One of the more interesting, and if you're in this business, everything's acronyms. And so they're changing the names of these two agencies, NIAAA and SAMHSA. NIAAA is now the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Now the bill changes it to National Institute on Alcohol Effects and Alcohol Associated Disorders. So it keeps the acronym, but the name changes. And SAMHSA will be, instead of substance abuse and mental health services, it'll be substance use. So they're getting away from the stigma on those agencies. And I don't know whether the agencies are already planning on those changes, but those are in the appropriations bill. We did have a wonderful meeting and with the head of CDC on the RESPECT Act and their adjustment to include people with FASD in more of an intervention side, because if you recall, the CDC, when they put out the request for proposals, it had increased that focus. And so we wanted to talk about the provisions of the CDC in our bill, plus the other provisions, whether the agency would be conducive to having some of those in their agency. So I don't know if Tom wanted to add anything on that. We have a lot, but if there's anything that you want to add on that, Tom, we can.
Well, I would just say, with CDC, we are, because of the long-term relationship that the field, that our community has had with CDC and the No Fast FASD United organization, we're looking very closely to see how we can enhance their role and make sure all the agencies that ought to be involved are ultimately working on the issue.
Okay. And as far as the Senate, they're still working on their appropriations. They have not passed their bill in the Senate Help Committee yet. So, but that's going to be going on in the next month or so. Okay. Respect Act, one thing when I reflected, it was about a year ago, a little over a year ago, that the Respect Act bill was introduced in both the House and the Senate. And Jen and I were talking about that this morning, and it seems like a lifetime ago, frankly. It has just been an incredible year. And I just, first of all, want to thank all of the advocates from around the country. I don't know if we're over 360 meetings, over 500-600 advocates. I mean, it's just been an incredible effort. So I just wanted to make sure that you all, and they've been all interesting, fascinating meetings, and we've done a lot of good work in educating members of Congress and staff. So this, and Jen can talk about this, nothing has changed with our path forward. Path forward obviously is narrowing, but because of the calendar, we know we'll have a new Congress in January of 2023. And those are.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So we're still looking at hearing or markup in the subcommittees or attaching it to another bill, and we can talk a little bit more about that on the upcoming slides. Jen?
I would say I probably get at least 5 to 6 emails a month from people asking, so is the bill done? Is it done yet? Or how much time do we have left? And so I just want to assure all of you that we have the full Senate session, or the full congressional session, to get it done. So it is over when the congressional session ends, which is scheduled for the end of December, but some years they extend it, some years they don't. So I think, really looking, we're targeting September, but realistically it can happen at any time during that span, and it is most assuredly not over. So I went to DC this month. My very first trip to DC, it was very exciting. And during that time, we had a lot happen. We had been asked previously by the authors' offices, by the original sponsors' offices, to give a reduced version of the bill and give some priority language in case they could sneak some of that, or sneak is the wrong word, but they could push some of the provisions that were really targeted provisions into another larger bill package, which again, if we go back to our visual of the 3 arrows and paths forward, that is one of the paths forward. So we did take some language that was condensed, and I'll let Susan kind of talk more about that, because when I say we, she did it. She was great at that, but gave them some condensed legislative priorities and provisions that could be put into some larger bill packages.
Yeah. And, I have to say, we've known this day was coming, that we were going to have to do it. But I think, I guess I'm a procrastinator, but I'm also, it was like, do I have to make a choice? It seemed like every single provision of that bill, that 60+ page bill, was important. But after all of these meetings, in the past year and a half, it became really clear from those meetings, and it did allow us to make that decision. It's like, what child are you going to, choosing a child. So it became clear that in order to make that our foundation, we needed to do the section on building FASD in tribal systems. We had to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to have systemic change. You can't just have federal money and then go out for a request for proposal for programs. I mean, that'll have incremental change, but to have systemic change, where you look at those silos in state in the state and, federal. So that one was top of the list. And then the second one was the Center for Excellence, because you need the Center for Excellence to be able to provide that technical assistance and deal with diagnostic capacity and to help states and replicate programs around the country. So those ended up with the two, and we went from a 60-some page bill to, well, it was single spaced about 3 pages. And when I got the request from Senator Klobuchar's office initially, I said, well, can I have, this was on a Monday and I was on the way to the airport to take our daughter. And I said, can I wait until the end of the week? Well, they want to have, they're marking up some bills, so they'd like to have it as soon as possible. So I did it, and we sent it to the staff, Anna and Ruth, from Markowski's and Klobuchar's office, and they really liked what we did. I mean, they liked our priorities, and in fact, Anna, I believe, said, it's still with the Republicans, it's going to be a tough sell, and we can talk about that in a minute, but we're going to push hard on this. And that was the kind of the message we got from the staff. We put possible mental health provisions, and that because if it goes into the mental health and substance abuse bill, and there has been a comprehensive bill that has passed the House and gone over to the Senate that the Senate's going to be looking at, there's lots of areas where we could put some mental health and substance abuse language that would direct FASD informed programs in those and provide funding for training. So that is almost drafted, and that'll go to the committees. So that's kind of where we're at. And I know I just saw a request for language. As soon as we get the mental health piece, I think we certainly can share that. Okay, anything else, Tom or Jen, on our condensed language? Okay. So Anna, who's with Senator Markowski's office, said that we really needed to meet with Senator Burr, who's the ranking member of the Senate Health Committee. And Jen could talk about, she had a meeting when she was in DC with Senator Murray's staff, but we did meet with Senator Burr's. And the hang up with Senator that we're facing with the ranking member is that he doesn't want new grant programs or new authorizations. So when you see this strategy pivot, we're emphasizing, and we talked about that with the new language in that meeting with the senator's staff. It's really not new. This is a reauthorization. I mean, there was an authorization of FASD programming back in 1998. And so this may be new language, but it isn't a new authorization. So, and when I kind of talked to and I asked whether they would consider that, and she said, because that's one of the things that they are focusing on, reauthorizations. When I mean reauthorize, maybe I need to talk a little bit about that. The code tells us what the Congress can spend, and some of those authorizations expire or are expiring. And so that's what they want to focus on. Ours is expired. It expired several years ago. So, and it's interesting with Congress, a lot of times they'll spend money on programs that are authorized, some that are expired, and some that have no authorization. The HRSA funding is not, it was not in the code. That was just appropriated. So we're going along with trying to figure out how to, thread that needle. And we have on there the confirmation of viability of strategy. And I think that's true, that once we focused on that, I think they were much more receptive. And also in our meetings with House Republicans have been more receptive to that. John, anything you want to add to that?
Well, Michelle brought up a really great point in the chat, and I think you talked about this, Susan, too, is that it's really hard, having looked at the Respect Act as a whole, thinking about, getting through what we can get through and having that flexibility, because honestly, the Respect Act in its entirety is what we feel we really need. And that's where politics comes in. And it is difficult and it is challenging to thread that needle or find that balance point of getting what we need, but also getting past what we can get past. And this is not an effort to give up on any of it. I don't think this is a letting go of any legislative priorities. I think it is incremental change that we're working towards. And one of the things that I liked and that we looked at in how we're readdressing the bill in the changed language, and again, we gave that changed language over to the Senate Health Committee to see if they can tuck it into another bill. That doesn't mean that we might not get the Respect Act put through in its entirety as well. Like, we're still working on that. This is just a two-pronged approach. So, but in getting that building FASD state and tribal systems put through, a lot of the provisions that are the other provisions of the bill could be addressed through those state and tribal systems, such as training for education, such as training mental health providers and healthcare providers. So they're not mutually exclusive. But it was a big shift for me too, to think about, oh gosh, I don't know, I don't want to give up on any of this, because this is all important to me. So it was, how can we do, if it does turn out that we're only getting some of it slipped into another bill, what's going to do the greatest amount of good with what we can get? Again, not that we're giving up on one, but let's take that two-pronged approach and make sure we're covering all our bases and not missing out on any opportunity to get something done, because momentum builds momentum. If we can get something done this year, even if it's smaller, that just gives us a broader base to be able to move on next year. It puts it on the radar. And, this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. We've talked about that multiple times, but this is not a one congressional session and done kind of thing. We're going to have to keep working at this year after year, session after session, to make sure, A, we're getting what we need for FASD, but then also we're protecting it. Because at one point there was robust FASD legislation. No longer, right? And so that's where this advocacy is just, it'll be a continual process.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. And I know that one of the things in redrafting, try to include language in the Center for Excellence that would deal with those, because deal with those sections relating to justice and education, and having funding within that to provide education in those areas. And I do have to say that the funding number that we put in is still the same funding, the new funding, which is $76 million. So we didn't take any of the funding from those areas. So the funding is going to be there. So it's a matter of trying to figure out how, through the Center for Excellence and through the Building FASD State and Tribal Systems, we can accomplish the same kinds of programming. And the mental health, I think the mental health language is really important, because there's a lot of funding through the gun safety bill, and that's going to be in the mental health bill. And if we can get language in there that says that through that funding, and utilize some of that funding for training in those systems, the community health, behavioral health, that it's FASD informed, that could be huge. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, and this new strategy pivot, we've seen this in the last couple of meetings that we've had with House Republicans, that they are far more receptive when we position the FASD Respect Act as a whole, not the condensed version, even the FASD Respect Act as a whole, as a reauthorization bill, because in essence it is. And that language pivot is starting to, we're seeing results with that. So this is, a learning curve for us too. And I think that should help. So I know there's some things going on in the chat here. Any progress within the executive branch among agency leadership paying more attention to FASD issues? And then the other question was just being realistic and flexible in what we can get. And if anything, I think the FASD community has demonstrated how we can be resourceful and flexible in terms of maximizing what we do get. I think in terms of getting executive notice on this, I don't know, Susan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we talked about the director of Center for Disease Control and our meeting with her, and we're going to have similar meetings with HRSA and SAMHSA. That's, but I just through, and maybe Tom could answer that, anecdotal information. I think there's a lot more interest and focus on FASD in the federal agencies.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Susan, as you said earlier, we know at NIAAA, we know that the director there is very much committed to our cause. We also know, as you heard Susan say, we had a meeting with the center director at CDC. We know that they are very committed. Very recently, a former sort of not colleague of ours, but a gentleman named Tom Coderre, he's now the acting deputy assistant secretary at SAMHSA. So in a very senior position there. And so you heard Susan mention that we want to reach out and have some meetings. So not only are we reaching out to have meetings with the leaders at other agencies, now at SAMHSA, we have someone who understands our organization. They've been to events that we've done. They understand FASD. So yes, we are continuing to build those relationships at the agencies.
All right.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody else is seeing the blue squiggly lines all over the screen. I don't know what those are. I don't know how they got there. So I apologize in advance. They are not part of the slides. That may be a Zoom functionality that I haven't caught on to yet. So my apologies. But, as Susan and I were reflecting back, because it has been a year since the bill was introduced, just looking at legislative priorities this year for the House and Senate, and thinking about all of the different events that we have gone through trying to get this bill passed and all it's all important things, but we're competing for space on the desks of these legislators. We're competing for time on the docket for getting bills put through. And just looking at all the things that have happened, boom, 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 over the last year and a bit that this bill has been worked on. It's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible year, and we were thinking of doing a timeline, but we just, didn't have time. But every single, if you think about, some of these on this list, you just wonder how the members and staff would even have the time to think about this legislation. And I have to say, given all of that that's going on, all the noise and the partisanship and whatever, all of our meetings have been very professional, not rancorous. They've been true. The staff members, to the most extent, I would say, have been truly interested in wanting to learn about FASD and what the bill does. And as we all know, we have these meetings and we can talk about its persistence and keep coming back. And there's some that sign up right away, and then there's others that, something happens along this line and it gets down to the bottom of the list. And so we need to come back. But it's been quite a year when you start looking through the list. And we'll talk about the most recent event. Yeah, I think in the next slide. Okay, so this is probably one of the most is going to have the most impact on our issue, and the net effect of the Dodd decision. And I would just ask, because I know that we all have our personal opinions and they vary amongst our advocates, and so we want to be respectful, and if we can limit our chat comments just to the Respect Act. But I think we at FASD United can say with authority, and we will be doing some kind of a lengthier analysis and statement, but and this is consistent with what we've said in the past, that there are going to be states that punitive policies for pregnant people with substance use disorders and increase access to treatment services are front and center as to what needs to happen with this issue. So we're asking all of you, because the decisions regarding reproductive health is going back to the states. And I would argue that the Respect Act will position where the states can have a thoughtful analysis on prenatal substance exposure and have funding to do that. So that's where you all are going to have a laser-like focus on FASD in your states. And these principles have to be front and center. So we're at, and CAPTA, what is your state going to be doing about CAPTA? What is it going to be doing about criminal penalties? But so you and science needs to rule on that. So I just wanted to bring this up, and that's the reflection question that you need to think about in your states and be just laser focused. I don't know if Jen or Tom or Susan, I'm not the only spokesperson here, but it's a tough, and it's changing the dynamic, but it is going to be states that are going to be making these decisions.
Susan, I would just add that this is an example beyond legislative policy where the policy team at FASD United is keenly interested in everything that occurs that could have an effect or implications for the FASD community. And we want to be well versed in these decisions that are made and appreciate the steps that we can take at a national and then working with you at a state level to address it. So this is an example of that. There are even others beyond the Respect Act, but it's all part of the policy team's mandate to make change. I think, Susan, you and we always talk about we've got to make systemic change. We've got to make sure policies are changed, so it's not just an individual or people benefiting in the moment, that it's really going forward and for all time that this issue is recognized and the investment is made available to it.
Okay.
All right. So moving back to our plan, where we're going, what we're doing. House and Senate are both going to be, the House is going to be in session in July. Senate is only in session a couple of days in July. And they've got some pretty big priorities that they're looking at getting done in July, August. I apologize. House and Senate are both in session in July. They've got some pretty big priorities that they're looking to get through in July that we've heard of from Burr, from Murkowski's office, from Patty Murray's office. So it looks like we've got our work cut out for us in the next couple of months. We've got a good chunk of time to be meeting with legislators in July. August, all our legislators are going to be back in district. That is a great time to get face-to-face with them, show up at their town halls, really be engaged with them about the FASD Respect Act. We had last August in terms of advocacy, and definitely hope to over this July and August as well. So we did hear from Senator Murray's staff that early July they're going to be looking at the substance abuse and mental health package. And so we're going to be very interested in seeing if any language any language from our bill gets put through on that. And then July and September, they are looking at an omnibus, so a larger package of a bunch of reauthorization bills for healthcare. And that's something that we heard from Senator Burr's office and Senator Murray's office. So if our bill is positioned as a reauthorization bill, that might be a great time to get it put through. So this is, we're hitting crunch time here. Action items, things we need to be doing, re-engaging with lawmakers. So if we had one meeting, if we've had 2 meetings, if we've had 3 meetings, let's have another. Let's keep meeting with them and keep talking about why this is important. And again, using for Republicans that we're meeting with, that reauthorization pivot, because that seems to be something that they're really, really engaging on. Definitely still focusing on Republican House members and specifically Republican House members on the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee. We did have a great meeting with Representative Curtis out of Utah this month, and that seemed fairly promising. We're going to keep following up with him. We've had meetings in Florida with Bill Rackus and Dunn. So it's something we're working hard on and advocates are working hard on, but we just need to keep pushing forward on that. And then always a continued focus on our Senate help members.
I just want to we talk about reauthorization. I think a lot of times people might glaze over. What that really means is that there was already a decision by Congress that attention and funding needed to go to an issue. And so what we're saying is that Congress has already made that decision based on, and Tom can talk more about that, originally the Institute of Medicine report. And so there's really, it's not just a new program. It's, it's saying that this was decided by Congress, that this was an important issue. So anyway, I hope that helps.
And in the chat, there was a question about wording the reauthorization language in emails to get additional meetings. You don't necessarily have to word it as reauthorization in your email. Getting additional meetings happens fairly regularly. We'd like to give you some additional information. We want to give you an update with where things are. That sort of thing usually works pretty well for getting a meeting. But definitely talking about, in case you did not know or you weren't aware, the FASD Respect Act reauthorizes FASD programs. And that's just a good way to kind of position that reauthorization language piece. Key meetings that we still need to get. These are the Senate Health Committee, is the committee of jurisdiction in the Senate that we have to get through, Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee in the House. And these are key players that we haven't met with yet on those committees. And we've met with the majority on both committees, but we still have more to do. So co-sponsors, we added 6 in the House this month with an additional 2 waiting in the wings that we know are going to happen imminently. So 55 in the House and 9 in the Senate. Not too shabby. Pretty happy about that. Current sponsors in the Senate, that hasn't changed for a bit. We've been a little slower on the Senate, which is to be expected. But that would be, be a great time to go back and revisit your 2 senators if they're not already signed on, which I think Hawaii is the only one that's Oh, no, Hawaii and Minnesota are the only ones that are in Hawaii, Minnesota, and Maine. My apologies, are the only ones that have really got that going on. Looking at the House, I don't know if you can even continue to see this anymore because the font has gotten so small. That list is updated on the FASD United policy site, and I do need to apologize. We got notice from our web vendor that they were doing server maintenance over the last few days on that site. So there has been some delays and much gnashing of teeth on my part, and maybe perhaps some of you in getting information off that site. We are hoping it will be resolved for good today. And but in the meantime, if you are needing a document off of the site, please just email me and I'll happily forward it to you. But yeah, it's been a pretty good month there. I was sitting back and thinking, it's felt like a really busy month. And then I went through and kind of did the catalog of meetings and what we've gotten accomplished this month. We've had 2 meetings with Senator Murray, a meeting with Senator Burr, a meeting with Senator Boozman, and then a number of House meetings this month. It's been a pretty activity heavy month for us. And we're making progress. We've met with 155 of the House members and 51 of the Senate members. But again, some of them we've met 3, 4. I can say Murray's office we've probably met 5 or 6 times with now. It's just a matter of persistence paying off.
Yeah, the Stelber meeting, Representative Stelber from the 8th Congressional District in Minnesota was interesting. Because that one was not constituent driven. There was another advocate in Minnesota initiated, just, did through the form, and it was, and I said, yeah, I'll go on. Well, it happened that Representative Stelber was actually on that meeting and not his health LA was, but he, because of the law in Minnesota that requires education on FASD for foster care, he has 2 children that he's adopted in foster care and in the process of a 3rd. And he was basically seemed very empathetic. He hasn't signed on yet, and he's, so I don't know what's going to happen, but he said that he got educated and thanked us profusely for what we were doing with the issue and the advocacy. So that was a very interesting meeting. So you never know.
The other one that was kind of somewhat jaw-dropping was the meeting we had down in Florida, where we were meeting with a legislative assistant, and we asked the usual question, just so we're on the same page and we're not boring you with information you already know, what's your understanding of FASD? And he says, oh, I know all about it. My wife has it. Okay, then. Oh, and her 2 siblings have it too. Okay, so we'll count on your support. Thank you. So yeah, you never know as you're reaching out and spreading that web, how you can connect people. Just kind of an overall snapshot of the country, and I really do need to change these colors away from pink and green because it's kind of hard to see, and I apologize. But just looking at the overall coverage in terms of meetings and where our sponsors sit. We're getting a lot of coastal activities and not as much in the in the Midwest, but just kind of take a view at your state and see where you've got areas you can be working on. Unless, of course, you're Hawaii, Alaska, or Maine. In which case, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and Wyoming. So looking at the Senate and work that's been done there, we've added a couple colors to the map. But, at the beginning of this, who would have thought that this kind of coverage was possible for the nation? And I think that's pretty exciting to see what this, small group of grassroots advocates has been able to accomplish. So the other thing that's been really exciting in June is, and maybe frustrating for some of you because the list hasn't been updated as quickly, we've had 50 new endorsements for the bill come in this June, in June alone. Typically, I get about 10 new endorsements a month. We had 50 this month. So lots of great work in Florida, in Georgia, in New York. We've had a couple from Washington State. We've had a couple come in from other areas of the country too. But I really encourage you to really look amongst your network and start sending out those emails just asking for endorsements. And every time that endorsement list is updated, particularly with something in your state, that's a great reason to go back to your 2 senators and your rep and say, hey, we've got more people coming on board with wanting to support the FASD Respect Act. We need your help. And the website for signing on, for those of you that don't know, it's super easy to sign on. You just go in, you fill out the form, boom, 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 and then you wait for me to get it put online. And I'm sorry, Melissa. Melissa from Georgia has been fantastic at getting co-sponsors in. And unfortunately, there's been a little bit of a delay with me getting that out back to her. So she's been very patient and has given me a lot of grace, and I appreciate it. So next, what's next? We are going to continue to push and book meetings. If you've already met with them and they haven't signed on, let's go back. Let's talk again. Continue building the endorsements. And then just a word, if you haven't gotten your information in yet to do a state proclamation, there is instructions on how to do that on the policy site. I really encourage you to go through and do a state proclamation just to get it on the radar. Again, it's another thing that you can forward to your 2 senators and your representative to say, we recognize this here in our state. We need your support and co-sponsorship. There's guidance documents that give you some sample language that you are welcome to use or make your own as you wish, and some examples of other states that have done them over the years. And there is a guidance document for, on a state-by-state basis, how to go about the process of getting a state proclamation done, because that can be it can be really easy in some states and very challenging and difficult in others. So there's a spreadsheet there that lists state by state, here's how you do it. And as always, I'm just so grateful for the support and work that everybody has put in together collectively on getting the Respect Act passed and working thoughtfully at FASD legislation and making, doing what we can to promote health equity for individuals with FASD and promote services and support. So thank you for that. And Susan or Tom, did you have anything you wanted to?
Go ahead, Tom, if you have any closing remarks. We've got a little bit of time. If there's any, specific.
Just a reflection, I'm reminded 24 years ago in the summer of 1998, the field was sort of in the same position. At the time, FAS, Prevention and Control Act, had been introduced. Wasn't getting a lot of traction, but a little bit. And in discussions with folks on the Hill, it was, well, I don't think we can do that this year. Or maybe we can do a provision or two. And Susan Carlson referenced it earlier, the IOM study had come out a couple of years earlier, and that was the basis for the bill. And another important factor is we had the majority leader of the United States Senate, who was a founding member of FASD United, on the case. But even then, it didn't look like we were going to get it done. But with weeks left in the session, the entire bill was added to a healthcare package that in the summer of 98 wasn't even on the radar. And so the bill passed, authorization bill. But then it was another year and a half until the appropriation was made. I think we can beat that this year, but we could also have, if we continue to build allies and are as active as ever up on the Hill with staff, and as Jan urges us all to keep those communications, keep those emails, keep those calls, keep meeting and talking about this, we can figure out a way to dodge all the traffic and get this whole bill in there. And if it's part of it, we'll be right back at it the moment the 118th Congress starts in January. So I'm really optimistic. We've never seen anything like this, and it's because of you all. It's because of the advocates, absolutely, completely. And then Susan and Jen's leadership. So I'm very optimistic and excited, but we got to keep the pedal to the metal and keep at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo that. And you do have to do the hard work. And I think Gigi, I looked at the chat and what Gigi said, and with everything that's gone on, we've just remained united and professional and provide information and our hearts. I mean, that was the one thing that I think comes across in all of these meetings with the advocates, that our system can do so much better, you know, for those with FASD and their families. So keep the faith. And I think between now and, I mean, ideally, if it would be great, wouldn't it, if we, looking at that calendar, Jen, if they could pick a date in September that they're both going to be there, or 2 days in a row, and we could pass the Respect Act and it's entirely one day and then the next day.
I would love that, and particularly if it's on that week I'm in DC in December or in September.
Yeah,
I would be 100% okay with that.
Bring back the calendar. We're going to be in DC that whole third week in September. We can
That would
go.
be great timing.
That would be great timing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have recorded this meeting in case there is anybody else that wasn't able to attend. I'll do my best to get this up on the policy site within the next day, so you can forward it on to anybody who's missed. If there are advocates in your state that are wanting to get involved and maybe just need a gentle nudge, or maybe need a little bit more support, or maybe need a little hand holding, let me know. I am happy to set up a Zoom with them and, start with Advocacy 101 and maybe get some new people. Not that I don't love all of you, but, how do we add to this? Who can we get, who else can we bring into this grassroots movement so that we're spreading the workload and making the voice a little bit louder? So in the chat, I know there was a question about policy updates from participants at the state level. I know we did talk about that a little bit at the beginning of the session. I'm anxiously looking at my phone to hear how the hearing from California is going for SB 101. Is it 1016 or 1018, Rachel?
1016.
1016. Okay, I had it right the first time. Yeah, they're having their education committee hearing today. Dr. Ken Jones is testifying, and then a special educator in California who's been working on the bill and advocating is also testifying. They each get 2 minutes. So we'll see how that goes. But it's looking really good that it should get through. It should get through the education committee, and then they have until early August, I believe, to get it through the appropriations committee, and then it would go out to a floor vote. So California is looking really good there, and excited to hear where that goes and kind of use that as a model if it works. And we're learning a lot from that state level advocacy.
Jen, the chat question by Hope reminded me, and I was going to mention that when we were talking about appropriations. And there's what they call congressional directed spending, and each individual member can submit that to the different appropriations bills. It's called congressional directed spending, but it's the old earmarks. And so, and it's available to every member to sit. So you, in your own district, and this is for future reference, is to ask your senator or your rep, do a proposal, and you can go on their websites, and there's dates, that'll be for next Congress, but you can ask for training for a program. I know there was one in Sarasota for training in foster care. So $1.5 million just to a program in Sarasota, Florida. So, and if you go on the website, the appropriations website, you can look under the bill in the language, and it'll tell it. And there's also a section you can just click on it for congressional directed spending, so you can see others that have gotten submitted that are in, that made the cut and are in the appropriations bill. So for future reference, that might be a good opportunity to get some specific funding for your programs in your states.
Yeah, and this would be the time to start talking about it. And I think we can maybe provide some more education and guidance in future forums. But typically your appropriations deadline is early spring, so March, April for most states. So now would be the time to start thinking about, hey, what program would we like to get funded that's in my congressperson's district, or that is in my state, that might be helpful to FASD? And, can this be a coalition? And start looking at, who made the cut last year and how was that positioned? Because that is a great way to get funding to your state specifically for FASD. And if you'd like to look at previous appropriations requests, they have, a lot of them will have examples there. And if not, we can share some of the ones that we've used in the past as well. So just something to think about going forward, and a good way to leverage funding. We are 2 minutes to the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Unless there are any other pressing questions or comments, I again want to thank you for being with us. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, July 27th, and look forward to seeing you all there. Any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me. My door is always open. If it is something urgent, feel free to call me. I do answer my phone, and I just, again, want to thank you all for your advocacy and support. So you are free to move about the country and do great work.
Just don't get COVID.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.